Batu, Barada, Nikto.
You must remember those words.
Gordon's alive.
You know what the Turing test is?
I know Kung Fu.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Stories Out of Time and Space. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and as always, I'm joined by Julian Darius. Julian, how are you doing? You okay?
I'm doing okay, but I'm not quite sure that I like the way you introduced me there. I think I'm going to downvote you.
That's right, yes. I feel like I'm on back for a bit of a nosedive. That's right, we are continuing our progress through Black Mirror. We've reached Series 3. And today we're talking about Series 3, Episode 1, Nosedive, starring Bryce Dallas Howard, Alice Eve, Cherry Jones, a few others. But primarily, we're looking at Bryce Dallas Howard. It's a bit of a single header. The story is a woman desperate to boost her social media score hits the jackpot when she's invited to a swanky wedding, but the trip doesn't go as planned. So, Julian, what are your initial thoughts in with regards to Nosedive?
I think, first of all, I think that it's a little slow. I think it needs about 15 minutes cut from its runtime, which is an awful lot. It's over an hour. I think it's fine. I take it that you have a negative opinion, so I'm restraining myself from phrasing it and playing devil's advocate. But I do wonder if the best way to run a Chinese-style social media score that allows you for everything would be based on your Instagram photos of food.
Yeah. I'm going to say I hate this episode, and I hate this premise. And I hate the way this was presented. It's firstly this. I know that there is this social scoring, and you said about the Chinese sort of thing as well, but that exists within a regular economic structure. People still pay for things. They've still got a job. Da, da, da. This episode basically introduces this concept of personal scores associated with your social media, but without actually linking to any one social media platform. That seems to drive everything from your economic status to your ability to be hired, to hire a car, to get on a plane, blah, blah, blah. Right? All fine, right? And some of that I get. But this is where, like, I was reading the reviews of this, and people are like, oh, this is on the nose satire, this is cutting, this is this is brilliant writing. And I'm going, it's really not, because like with many of these things, this is the problem I have, and why I'm sort of getting a bit peeved with some of this writing, is it doesn't work in a wider context. Yes, you're going to tell this one person story, this Lacey Pound, you're going to tell her story, fine. But again, like we had this when we watched Westworld and stuff. Again, like you roll this out and you go, like there's a scene where like there's two people there's a couple that have split up, and the guy who works at this place has been marked down. Everyone's choosing to be on the other person's side. But if he goes below a 2 or a 2.4 or whatever, he can't access the building. Well, what if that's your best accountant or your best programmer or the CEO? Like it makes no sense. And there's also, like, money appears to have been eradicated from this scenario. It's only based on your ability to be associated with things because you're a high scorer. Like I don't see money sort of transacting in sort of parts of this episode. So I'm just like, the whole thing starts to sort of, I don't know, it just felt so shallow and sort of, shallowly thought out. I got a bit irritated by it. And then there's a reveal at the end, which bothered me even more, but we'll get to that.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, I think that comparing it to the entire history of You, which is a far superior episode from the first season, both sort of want to take this technology, build it into the world so that everybody assumes this is the case, and then focus on one particular character's story. And I think that why it works there is because the imagining that technology integrated with the whole world while it has its problems is a little easier to do. And secondly, that character's arc is related directly to that technology. Here, you realize that the main character's arc is just about her being crazy and resentful, right?
Well,
She's
no,
had problems from the
obsessed.
beginning.
Yeah, that's the ending. Oh, sorry, you finish, and I'll get to it because it's just.
Well, no, I mean just that it is harder to imagine how this works. I will say that there is money. I mean, you don't see it exchanged, but there does seem to be payment for the rental car. There is a quote on the house, the apartment that she wants to get, that she wants to rent, and it's very expensive. And they say there's a 20% discount
Right.
if you're
Yeah, that's
over
true. That's true.
4.5. Okay, so there is money, and the way that it affects things is like tantamount to a 20% discount. So that doesn't bother me as much as one thing that really irritates me about this episode and its presentation of character is that it's totally black and white.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody is either, the most superficial lying person imaginable because this has made people bad, or they are, cursing and
Authentic
out of the
and yeah.
system. Yes, authentic and just checked out. And I think I tell people the truth all the time, and I tell people things that are, other people couldn't get away with, and people, I say it with a smile, and people find it charming, and I'm sure people would rate me decently high. I, and I think, what about occupations where like you're a garbage man? I mean, or you've got to tell people negative things all the time. You're a police
That's what I got.
officer.
Yeah.
Um,
And law
I
enforcement
do
in this is
wonder
just
about that.
yeah. Well, law enforcement again, but one of the things that that thing of negative having there are a number of times where in work you'll say like, okay, I've got to have a difficult conversation. Well, in this scenario, like you don't, like because you just go, oh, all right, well, I have a difficult conversation and it's gonna mark me down, so I'm gonna give it to this other person. There's always gonna be someone at the bottom of the tree that's got to have that conversation. Like working in HR must be the worst job in this world. What
Oh, I
if
don't think it
you
would change HR at all. They'd
no,
still show up with a smile on their face and say, "We have an exciting opportunity
yeah.
for you in Thule."
Mm. I mean, does this extend to like world leaders? You can give me a 4, right? I'm going to war. Then we're going to go. We're going to give we're going to put economic sanctions against this country because he only gave me a 4 instead of a 5. Like, I don't
We
know.
tried that over here. It was called Bill Clinton.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I think one of the problems with this film, this episode is, for me, is that thing of like the forced human nature of like and I get that there is that, and it's this idea of influencing and or this other stuff of being marked up on, but as you said, that it seems to sort of literally nosedives in the last 5 minutes into her being crazy and then confessing love and almost obsession for the person whose wedding. So she's got to attend this wedding and she's going to give this speech, and she's been put down as the maid of honor and she's going to give this speech. And she's worked really hard on it. But at the end of like the last scene is pretty much last scene, but one of the last scenes is her being dragged away by security, confessing her love and obsession for the bride. And I was like, wow, that came out of nowhere because that's never been mentioned before in this sort of like they've alluded to this thing about Mr. Rags. There's this one story, but like I don't know. It just it's like you said. Then she's in prison, and then it's. I'm just exhausted.
You like this episode, Scott.
Hmm?
You like this episode, then?
What's frustrating? I like Bryce Dallas Howard. Like I think she's a good actress, and I've liked her things. So I was actually kind of looking forward to this one. And it starts well. You have those initial reactions where she's reacting to stuff of people with their dog or their food, or like an interaction with the guy at the coffee shop, and I'm like, okay, this is all rather innocuous. And then they bring in the house, and it's this plan to up the score. That's the whole point. Get to this wedding because if you get to this wedding, they're all high 4.5s and above. So if they all give you a 5, then you're a shoo-in. Like this is amazing.
Yeah, somehow that counts for more because I mean that's not totally clear, right?
No, It doesn't seem to make. Yeah, that doesn't. They're still giving the same 5 stars. Maybe they're linked with the names, so people can see the names you've got. Oh, she's got lots of 5s from people of a high status that people, you might have like as a resume. But it becomes the sort of the point is her. So the bride at the end, when she calls her out and says this was about likes for both of us, is totally true. But then there's this thing about and I'm fine with that. But like this whole thing about this journey of mishaps, this sort of like planes, trains, and automobiles journey that happens between it becomes so sort of farcical that I don't know. It just at some point I was just like, this has lost the plot. Like this is just making no sense anymore. We're diving into like hysteria, but I don't understand why. Like, stopping now would be a better plan, but. Yeah.
Why she doesn't stop is odd. And the way she loses it time and time again, I don't buy, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, okay, so are you really going to react even at the airport that way? Yeah, you're pissed off your flight's canceled, but it's not this person's fault. And you also know you're on the social score system. She doesn't seem adequately to understand that.
You'd be indoctrinated as well. You'd be trained. You would be socially and emotionally trained to react in a certain way. Like this is that nature nurture. Like society would have trained you to react in a certain way to these scenarios to maximize your scores. So you're right. So the moment she goes off and she's like, "Get me your fucking supervisor," I'm like, well, that's what? Like that feels massively out of character for this world.
Even in our world, that's an obnoxious person, right? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think so. At its heart, this is looking at the influence of social media and sort of that Chinese social rank system, and trying to say, for one thing, and I do find this a legitimate observation and an important one, how much people censor themselves and present a positive version of themselves online. And I see this all the time. I mean, I'm somebody who struggles with depression. Nobody wants to read the Twitter post that's like, thinking of killing myself today.
Two thumbs up.
See, like, I know, like what? I mean, what do you even do to that? Do you like it? Like what? Well, I mean, and then you see people doing that, and it's really awkward for you, even as somebody who struggles. And then, I mean, there is this sort of like, I people feeling the need to take photos of their food, take photos of their vacations, and they never like take photos of like waiting at the bus terminal yet again in Italy. There's a scary man here. Here's a photo of him. Instead, it's like, look at us on the beach with our martinis, and nobody ever takes. I mean, it's the same thing of like smile because you're taking a photo. I never understood that. That always seemed really fake to me. It's almost like let's edit our memories, so when we look back on this, we think we were a happy family. So I mean, there is a central observation here that I like. I think it's played out, in far too exaggerated a way, and it doesn't deal with those real world implications. So what I mean by like exaggerated is everybody's black or white. Everybody's like, I mean, her brother is kind of a mid-range, like, don't worry about it too much. But then, he's the only example of somebody who's maybe gray, and then you have these sorts of down and outers who are like, I love saying fuck, and I love, which, okay, that's fine. But I mean, I don't think that you have to play that game to such a degree. I think that there would be plenty of people who would be like, look, I am who I am. I hope people like me. I mean, I've got a 4 or whatever. It's not really that hard, when everybody feels pressured to give 5 stars to everything. If I'm a 3.8, what does it really matter?
Well, this is where, like you say, yeah, exactly. You get the people. Well, the thing, like, when she meets the woman, the trucker, and you find out the woman's like a 1.4 or something, and you find out why. She's like, basically, because I told everyone to fuck off. Like, the world was challenging me, and I broke down, and then it spiraled. And so like you said, I've pretty much disengaged from that. But she's genuinely a nice person.
Yeah.
So she
people
picks
would rate her high,
exactly,
right? You and I would both rate her
So
high.
you'd be
Giving
like,
somebody a ride.
yeah. She picks her up, she gives her a hand, and I'm like, so how if your interactions with other people are all fine when you get petrol or food or just in the street, like you're not just yes, you've had a situation that drove you to lose your temper and your cool, and you got but you sound like a genuinely nice person that would be able to get a middling rating relatively quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this feels bizarre.
Absolutely.
And so I know we did this a lot, but I've got other thoughts of how this would have been more interesting to have approached as a sort of especially as a Black Mirror. So again, I was thinking, okay, well, if you're at the bottom, you're unhireable for whatever purpose, but you're still going to have entrepreneurs. Money still exists, right? Like, you're saying that, okay, we've established, actually, I'm partially incorrect on that, and money still exists. Cool. There will be people with money, lots of money, because let's be honest, CEOs are not nice people. They're mostly psychopaths. I think that's sort of pretty much accepted. That would be down in the ones and low, that would be going like, all right, well, I'm still rich. I'm still producing a product that people want. So, and these other people, these other low ones, they're desperate for work. We'll probably get away with paying them minimum wage for doing the job because no one else can hire them. So, yeah, all right. I'll game the system. I'll be hiring all these 1.2s and 1.4s to work in my factory, or in the office or whatever, because then I'm going to pay them a great deal because they can't go and work. They can't leave me to go work for the thingy. But then they would all become friends. They would all get on, and then they would start upping each other, and they would move up. Like, the whole situation doesn't, like you said, it's not. We've said this before. When you got to follow this situation through, I want to see the world, like, and how this has worked in the world. And this is, you said, this is over an hour, and it's so shallow as a story that I'm like, this is not testing me on this premise. It's irritatingly so.
Well, and I think lack of imagination of how this would really work is one of the problems of Black Mirror generally. That sort of wider world implication. It's very interested in implications, but in this sort of narrow personal way, right? It doesn't often go into that wider world kind of thing. I thought that people who are rich might have higher scores just because everybody wants to suck up to them, right?
Yeah.
But again, there's not even a single line of dialogue in an hour and 2 minutes where somebody addresses, the obvious class issues that are present in this story. Even in her speech, she doesn't really address class. That seems very shocking to me. The other thing that really bothers me, and I mentioned it a few times, is this kind of like Instagram thing. Like, if you imagine a social media score or, a sort of social score or whatever, I like the idea. I'm totally down. But it's not going to give you points for, I like your photography, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's a different score. That's not, now maybe that's an app that took over, but we don't know that. Right? That's not established. I would love to be able to just rate, actually, this guy at the door, this doorman is a total prick and made me feel totally uncomfortable just walking into a building, right? This guy on the street is ranting at people or driving like a maniac. I'd like to be able to downvote them. And I'd also like to be able to upvote, the person, the barista who was just made my day. She was so amazing. It doesn't have to do it. There are plenty of situations in life where I'd like to be able to do that, but that would not be the same score as your cake photos,
Yeah. Well, there's two parts of this that are actually in the episode I wish were more explored. The first one we've talked about is the sort of the woman on the bus driver, the truck driver who 1.4, who should be higher because she's a genuinely nice person. But the other one is the petrol station or the fueling pump. Like, she's looking, her car's running out of fuel, and so she sort of has it. And she's asking for a charging point, like an adapter for her old car, because she's only because of her score, she can only get the older cars. Which I'm like, that's so stupid. Because I'm like, well, she's got the money, just take the money. Like, the businesses still must exist to make profit. That's just stupid. But
Or if you really want to have some implication, have it be 5 or 10% more expensive because we can't trust you as much or something.
Like an
But we're not
insurance,
going to just
like,
give
yeah,
you an
like the
old
cost.
car with no ability to charge.
Yeah, because that means you're then going to downvote the company then, which is seems. But the interaction with the guy at the petrol station, and he says something when he gives her a 2 and she's leaving, and she comes back and she's like, "What do you mean? How come a 2?" And he's like, "Well, it wasn't like a meaningful encounter, you know." Like, why do they even have to what he's almost like, well, why do I have to give you a score for you asking for an adapter? Like, I don't have one. I can't help you at all. I've been trying to be nice about it. Nothing I can do. And she's like, 5. And he's like, well, a 2. I'm being honest. Like, what's this got to do with the rest of my day? And I'm like, yeah, like there's this thing about, you said about the artificiality of it. But there's almost this thing of like, you would get people that are genuine and be just like, well, someone would go 5 and you'd be like, well, thank you for that. And they're not doing anything. Like,
Right.
what? They can't get you, but they can't
I don't
make
need
you
to
do
rate
it.
you.
Yeah.
I don't know who you are as a person. You asked for an adapter. You were polite enough, but I don't feel the need to rate everybody when I run into them walking their dog, right? There would be people who would just kind of like, I mean, I would be like that. I'd be like, I didn't feel like it.
Yeah. It's just the enforced polite. I get to the enforced politeness because I feel that there's a bit of a commentary that isn't in there, but I sort of saw and put in the mouth. But this whole thing about, I say, the types of what you would end up with and how it links with money. The other thing is, it's not monetized at all. Like, there's never an option, because if you're on Instagram or anything, you can buy likes, you can buy followers. So there's no option proposed at any point where, like, the guy who's trying to like help get her score up is like, well, you can buy likes. Like, it's not, really the done thing, but it's enough to get you over the line if you can do these other things. Like, yeah. So again, like, this is that lack of imagination where they're not really going. They're just going, here's this one idea, and I'm going to flog it to death without really exploring its implications. And this is why this episode does my head in, because I'm just like, by about halfway through, I was really bored. Like, really
that's what
bored.
I mean by it really needs to have 15 minutes cut.
Yeah.
And this would be a much stronger episode of 15 minutes. I think a lot of the stuff that bothers you would bother you less if you said you got in and out, you told a story, it's still a 45-minute story, but it's the story of this woman, and it goes from somebody who is in the system and being very fake to being, down and out and just saying, screw it. So I mean, that's a solid arc. There's something to recommend it there. I do think the runtime is a huge problem here.
Yeah. I mean, this is the first of the thing is, this is the first of the Netflix ones, and there's a lot of money on display in this. Like, it's clearly, it's got a good budget. It looks all right. You got Bryce Dallas Howard in it. Like, you're paying money for this thing. But yeah, I was bored and I was really worried. I'm like, oh, have we turned a corner now? And like, money's going to have made this, is this really the future? The thing I kept thinking about, though, like I said, was about this idea of that sort of explored in Celebrity, a little bit like with 15 million merits and, those sort of ideas. It would have been more interesting to see her nosedive as a genuinely nice person going through trauma. I mean, you have horrible people, right? Like, like a Basil Fawlty kind of character, like someone like, notoriously British horrible people. Like, her as a genuine person having a nosedive, comparing it to, say, like, do you know what? Have them as a serial killer, all right, that's in prison, but like a psychopath that is charming and everything, and seems to be keeps being interviewed for the news. People keep upskilling. Like, this guy's gone to, like, is the most, he's now at 4.9. Like, we know he's a serial killer, but for some reason, people, like serial killers get
letters in jail,
letters in jail, proposals of marriage, blah blah blah. Like,
that is actually my plan to finally get a relationship.
It's a solid plan.
I mean, it seems to work for them.
It's worked for a lot of people, yeah. But I'm saying, like, that'd be more interesting to have that running parallel in some way, where, like, he actually gets his death sentence. He's sort of to be executed. That gets stopped because he's a 4.9, and they're like, oh well, we can't let 4.9. He's actually, this is good for the prison.
Yeah, or you have the guards saying, why am I a 2.8 and you're a 4.9? You
Yeah.
8 kids.
Yeah, you literally wore a child's face for whilst driving around, but you're a 4.9. Show if you
I think
really
that would be a slightly different episode, in fairness, but I would like to see
I actually think that to me would get more to the point that they're trying to sort of this idea of up scoring somebody, the wrong people getting up scored and having an impact. Would that be more that'd be more interesting to me? Because I mean, the Orville did this as an episode, and it was more comedic, and I thought that was an all right episode, but I thought that was a better handled there than it is in this show.
No, I think this compares. There's a Community episode too that does this, where they have an app, and everybody instantly changes their personalities and stuff. But no, I agree that this kind of compares unfavorably to other examples of this. I would say that it's surprising to me that it doesn't address class.
Yes.
Because one of the things that I think it is trying to address, and doesn't and is at least interesting about, is gender. And you see the way all the women who are playing the game, they talk like this, and they have sing-songy voices, and they practice smiling, and they're all these sort of like infantilized, stereotypical versions of women who are really playing up stereotypical gender. And I thought that was interesting, and I think that they could have leaned into that more in terms of sort of highlighting the ways in which women have to, I mean, I could see, look, I've seen reviews of professors that say, I don't like the way she dressed. Like, it never would occur to me to review a professor for that. Like, that's mind-boggling to me. And there'd be tons of people who would be like, a 1, I don't like your hat, and for both genders, but especially for women. And you would see that added. I would love a discussion of that kind of added pressure that women are under. And I'm amazed by how all the women in this have this sing-songy, high-pitched, kind of mousy, childlike,
the clueless
demeanor.
What's it called, the Valley Girl kind of.
Yeah.
No, that's a really good point. That'd be fascinating to explore that, to be sort of like this idea of actually, in fact, if you really wanted to push it, like, it's not just class, but like this idea of gender as well. That, do you know what? Actually, the highest people on this thing are actually, like I say, heteronormative. It's people of sort of like, they're all blonde, they're all good. It's Barbie and Ken have got to the top of the tree because that's this exactly. Aryan sort of like look at how we. I think that could be really interesting.
Well, this leads me to my second point about that, which is the LGBTQ, element. So I have watched this with trans people, and I, as a, basically cis white man, who, people find charming when I tell them off half the time, I am not especially scared or horrified of the system. They are abjectly terrified, right? Because when your identity and the way you dress is put to a vote constantly publicly, this is something that is going to, there's no trans person who's going to have higher than a 2, right? Unless you're in San Francisco or something. I mean, everybody passing is going to be like, oh, is that a guy wearing slightly feminine clothing? And this is going to be your experience all the time. You're going to be terrified. You're already terrified to go out, depending on who you are. Now you're terrified to go out because literally your apartment's going to cost more when somebody doesn't like you on the street. And I think that element is not explored at all either. What I mean,
no,
repressed. What about people with handicaps?
Yeah, there's a fact. I think you talk handicaps is an interesting one. Yeah, especially in sort of like some sort of physical deformity or whatever. Like but you say about the LGBTQ community, like this idea of, if you were to run let's run the experiment forward or whatever, right? And let's forget about where we are at in the current thing, because it's a different timeline, this is a different world, it's speculative fiction. I don't think you would have within anyone over a 3. It jokes about it because actually the couple that are broken up it's a gay couple, right? But
right.
so it assumes an element of liberal thinking within this world, but that's not the case. Let's be clear. We live in a dangerously conservative world. So I actually think that you would end up in a world of predominantly conservative values, because that's the safest way to stay in the higher things where you can do what you want to do. So there'd be people that, you probably would have things like conversion therapy. There would be people that are like, well, I can't come out. I've got to, like in the closet for the entirety of their life because so you then have like an illicit, queer underground or something like secret
I'd love
meetings.
to
Like,
see the sort of like rest stop hookup between two
exactly.
guys, where they're
And then
like
both
at
give
the
each other a
end,
5, and they give
one
each other
guy
a
gets
5.
the rating and he's like, oh shit, like I'm a 5, like are we rating each other now? Like we're not supposed to be here. Like
your wife's like, how did you have 4 from this dude in a truck stop? I just think you're right. I think this sort of social thing, like, we could rebel against it, like, and there would be to begin with. But actually, if you're then stopped from going to work, or you can't, from certain levels of employment, from certain companies, certain social groups, and let's be clear, even within the LGBTQ plus community, like they don't all get on. Like people are people.
Right.
Just because you're in with the community,
Right.
people are still people. They won't like each other. So I just think this kind of thing drives heteronormative, conservative values and standards. Now, this comes back to one of the prisons I was curious about as I watched this, and it triggered me, but you mentioned something that's brought it back to my mind. This idea of a living in an inauthentic way for fear of reprisals, okay, feels a lot like religion.
Okay. I was waiting for this.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I live in a country where you routinely hear people say things like, well, I know that person is a good person because they're a Christian. Really?
Literally,
right?
literally,
so, I mean,
he's beating a migrant to death with a stick. Yeah.
In some cases. I mean, I don't think, I mean, there are people who would downvote everybody they see who shows any sign of a religion other than Protestant Christianity.
Yep.
So you imagine a Sikh, walking down the street. It's just a series of just downvotes. I mean, any sign, I mean, imagine going out in a hijab, good luck. I mean,
well, all right, you're right, because I think, but this is it's not just the you're right about the thing, because basically what you're talking about is you would end up with the ghettoization of all. You wouldn't have anything. You would have, right, literally, here's the Hispanic, Catholic community. Here's the Indian, Hindu or Sikh community, and the Islam community, and the Catholic community, and right? It would be on those, and then the queer community or whatever, right? So because you can get uplifted in those, that's you getting a 5 in that community because you're a good Catholic or you're a good Hindu or whatever. But there's still this idea, for me, to go even further, was this idea of religion in itself. This idea of being inauthentically nice, in front of people. You said about this idea of public face, social media and sort of thing. But there is this idea of like morality. Like there's this constant stupid debate of like, well, without religion, there is no morality, which is complete cack. You and I as atheists, I love this when people say like, yes, I rape and murder and pillage as much as I want to. I don't want to because there's no need to. But this feels like that thing of punishment, isn't it? This fear of hell, this fear of reprisal from a deity. I'm going to get marked down. All right, well, if I get marked down, does that mean I end up at the gates of hell? I don't know. Any thoughts on, I mean, do you feel that this could be apart from the ghettoization, just the fear of reprisals being, forcing you to act good, in this faux moralistic way.
Well, it's funny because I just had a conversation about this, sort of the way in which religion encourages people to sort of like present a happy face. And and I think it is sort of akin to that social media effect. And actually what I was arguing was that a lot of religions kind of give people wins and gains early on, right? So like if you are an alcoholic who, cheated on your wife and is in danger of losing your family, well, if you go and suddenly you have this community and they talk to you and they love on you and, encourage you to get clean and help, give you resources and whatever and give you something to do with your time while you're doing that. And at the end of 6 months, you're clean and sober. You've, made some atonement with your wife. You maybe not everything's forgiven, but you're in a much better place. And you're going to church and you're like, I am on cloud nine. I have turned my life around. Like everything's good. And then it all's downhill from there, right? Because from then on, you've got to go to church and smile. And it's okay to be like, yeah, I'm stressed out. Yeah, I've struggled with these thoughts or that. But if you go to church and you're like, yeah, I really wanted to burn my house down and screw a whore last night, nobody's going to be on your side, right?
Yeah.
You can wobble from because you've been perfected, and you can wobble from that perfection. But if you dip down to I've really been struggling with gambling addiction for the last 6 months as a Christian, yeah, you're going to have more trouble. And so there is this kind of, no, we're part of a community now. You've had those wins, but now you've got to present yourself as smiling and put together and a part of that community. And I think that is a phenomenon of religion, which I will admit, has helped people. And I think there is this pattern of, it giving people gains, in the beginning, especially of community, but also of, support and everything else. And even therapies that aren't actually efficacious can be efficacious if you believe in them and they distract you from the thing that is tearing you up inside. But you're not allowed to be torn up inside as a fundamentalist Christian who's been going to church for 5 years, right?
Which is but that's why they are all torn up inside, because they're under such duress to not express themselves in that way that they all become a little bit crazy. But this is that thing, is that you're right. It's like, you hear about this of like, the reason I do good things is because, the word of God and to get me in heaven. And you go, so you're telling me that if you didn't have those things, you'd be kicking this person on the floor? Like, I don't understand what the alternative is. And there's this thing of like the lack of God, atheism would result in anarchy. But what this to play onto Nosedive is, again, this idea that like to get up scores, everybody's incredibly nice to to each other, and they're all sort of like, hi, bye, and how wonderful everyone is. And again, it's sort of like social conditioning to be nice, in that fear of reprisal, going like, well, if we didn't have the fear of the up score or the nosedive, then no one would be nice to each other. You go, well, that's probably not true. We've seen someone that is. Like, I think the woman in the truck is almost like she's almost acting in that atheist position, isn't she? Where she's like, yeah, I'm at the system, but I'm still a genuinely nice person, but I don't believe in the God of the social media score.
Right. You're making me like this episode a lot more, Scott. Thank you. It really is a metaphor for religion and conformity.
It could be.
It could be. It could lean into these things, though. And it does. I mean, I also think about like how this is so cultural, right? I mean, and the episode doesn't need to address this, but I largely grew up in the Midwest. In the Midwest, we are often painfully polite to people. And, there is I still believe there is an essential goodness to a lot of Midwesterners that I have experienced. Having said that, I mean, there are plenty of scumbags too, but having said that, I feel like so relieved when I'm in France, because I'm like, I can walk down the street and just say, fuck you and your cat, and nobody cares, right? It's just like, oh, well, screw you too. And everybody's just like, no, I'm going to be my genuine selves.
Yeah.
And if somebody says thank you too much in France, they're like, I'm suspicious he's trying to manipulate me, and they downvote the person for saying thank you too much. Well, we're taught to say please and thank you every time the wind blows, in the Midwest.
Well, that's another
downvoted.
thing. That'd be another thing. Have some cultural differences in this. Like, have a tourist, or she come across a tourist that's really struggling and has been downvoted. Like, there's the thing is with this like I say, the runtime, it runs at just over an hour. And like I say, it just doesn't. This is my fear. Right? I'm saying this right now. This is my fear for the Netflix version of this show. There's more money and you get more time, but I actually think that the ideas are going to be shallower. That's my fear. I think this is sort of like, this is a one-note idea that is not explored, and I'm really concerned that that's going to be a running theme. I could be wrong.
I don't think that's fair. I don't think that that's right. But we'll see whether, going through it this time, whether I retain that opinion, and we'll see what your opinion is. I don't perceive a huge difference between the Netflix stuff and the British stuff, to be honest.
No,
I mean, there is more budget. I mean, I remember like the Waldo moment where it's like, oh, there's a crowd of 15 people shot, so it doesn't look that obvious. So there is more budget here, but I mean, I like that. I don't feel that there's a massive shift. I feel like this is just, we've had 7 episodes. Here's the 8th, I guess. I mean, obviously they didn't air them in the, the numbers that they were written and shot in, but yeah, I mean, I don't think this is a terrible episode. I mean, I think that what upsets me about Black Mirror is that everybody loves Black Mirror, and I love Black Mirror, but the batting average of Black Mirror is super high. And I think the same thing's true of, like, it's inevitable we talk about Twilight Zone because, we've done that. The batting average of Twilight Zone is incredibly high.
Yeah.
The issue then becomes, like, I think there were fewer stinkers of Black Mirror, but Black Mirror also has a lot fewer episodes and a lot bigger budget and the other. So I think both of them are doing incredibly well. This is really the inheritor of the Twilight Zone in terms of just quality stuff with a high batting average. The problem then becomes, like, what are the standouts? What are the ones that you're like, everybody should see this? And Twilight Zone has a number of episodes, partially because of its cultural place, that I just think, oh, this is amazing. It might not be higher than an 8. It doesn't, it's not, a sublime masterpiece, but it's damn good and you should see it. The question that becomes, how many episodes of Black Mirror are like that, at least in my mind. And I think when that's what you're looking for, something like this that is a pretty middling episode, in both of our views, even if it upsets you more than me, feels like a tiresome sort of spinning of the wheels, and for me, like a little bit of a redux with everything worse of the entire history of you.
Yeah. No, I agree. Actually, I think that's it. I think the offense I have taken on this is partially that, is that you got more money, you got more time, and this is the best you're going to give me off the bat. But again, like, this is overlong. I think the story's a mess. It starts well and clear, and then by the end, it seems to be about something completely different. Like, when she's been dragged away, like this thing of needing to, this almost comedic thing of her going like planes, trains, and automobiles in order to get to this wedding after being told don't come, and she's like, no, I'm coming, and they're all going to vote me up. It's sort of like, okay, you're now on some crazy quest to get these upvotes, but that what you turning up in this ripped dress and all sort of stuff is going to be a disaster. So you've gone into the version of crazy. Okay, but then her going like, I love you and I always loved you to the bride. And I'm going like, okay, you sort of alluded to something because of this Mr. Rags, this doll, and you keep going to this one point of this one story about how before that there was this one genuine moment of niceness between the two of you when you were in camp or whatever. And I'm like, okay, cool. So that was what this was about, that you're actually, you are attracted to this woman, you love this woman, and you wanted to impress her. Like, was that ever part of the reason you really wanted to go to this wedding? Like, it's kind of called out by the brother that she was treated like crap. And I'm like, okay, well, but it's never like centered on. It never seems to be a thing. And then they just call it out at the end, and you're like, all right, well, I didn't realize that was a part of this story. Like, it feels almost like a B plot that was never extended because you were so enamored with this first thing that you keep coming up with that isn't really that, well handled either.
Well, this is an example. We often talk about how we want stories to continue. This is kind of an example of a setup that's, interesting and fine. And then it just kind of goes off and it continues and continues and continues. And by the end, it's not really about the social score stuff. It's really one woman's story of, and then just has this twist at the end that she's had this romantic attraction. And there's a version of that that's good, right? But none of that is telegraphed. I am maybe more forgiving because I think, okay, it's one story, one particular person. It's maybe not the right thing for me to say, well, let's set it in a prison instead. I would probably find that more interesting,
Yeah.
but
All right, I'll give you an ending.
right.
I'll give you an ending to this, then, right? The group of women, it's not just the bride that she knows. There's a group of women that she has been on the outside of. She was always the brunt of the joke, right? She was always the sort of the runt of the litter, if you will, of this group of friends. She was always the one that was downplayed, and they've all gone to be 4.5 and above, right? And they've sort of left her behind. And this is her opportunity. And it begins with her wanting to join that group. Oh, this is my opportunity. I can join. And the brother going like, why are you doing that? You know they're horrible to you. This is all a disaster. It's waiting to happen. But the fact of the matter is, she can then relay all these memories. But as it gets worse and worse, and they keep probably prodding her and calling out the fact, when she gets the wedding should then be her turning up and not trying to do a thing. It should be her going, you want some truth bombs? So-and-so slept with so-and-so. You did this. You did that, so that the actual wedding becomes in a downvote massacre of everybody giving each other a 1. And then her leaving with her head held high going, that's the consequence of this not being dragged away. Because she becomes this sister, like, do you know what I mean? The nosedive should actually be her going, yeah, this is all meaningless. This is nonsense. This is ridiculous. Having that realization, but then humiliating this group of fake influential, rich people and stuff. Like, that would be more, I don't know. Like, I know they try to end on a cynical note, these things, and that's the point. But I don't know. It just feels her dip into hysteria feels sort of like, wrong for this character.
No, I agree, and it makes the whole episode about something else. And again, I think there's an episode that could be about that, right? Like, I have a gay attraction for this friend, and that's not socially acceptable, right? Except we've already seen it is in The Office, so it's not like, gays face a hard time on this app. Well, that's not really the case. I mean, it could have gone in that way, and that would have been interesting to me. But yeah, I do think the meltdown, like, if you're there she still, even if she loves this friend, she still wants those pluses. Part of her brain is still like, I want those pluses. But as you say, she's showing up, she's crashing a wedding at this point. And then ironically, it kind of undermines the entire message, because it makes me think, well, maybe you're a 4.4 for a reason. Like, maybe, there's a reason why they're 4.8 and you're 4.4, and you're working really hard to get to a 4.4. Maybe you're kind of a crazy, unlikable person, and people can kind of tell you're fake.
Yeah, there needs to be more to it. Anyway, But we are coming to time really on this. So, any final thoughts on first episode of season 3, Nosedive?
It's a brilliant episode. I love it so much. It's great to see with an American influence and American dollars what you can make Black Mirror into. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, everything you've said, but the opposite. I'm downscoring those thoughts. Yeah, no, I don't know. This was the biggest problem with this. Oh no, the two biggest problems, as I've highlighted, is it sticks to a single thread without exploring beyond that periphery of this one linear story in an hour, and so it becomes boring. And that's the problem with this. By about 35 to 40 minutes in, I was literally looking at my watch and going like, I've got another 20 minutes of this, and I'm struggling to give it my attention, and that's a real problem. So yeah, I downscored this episode. I gotta say, I really did downscore this episode. It's not a good start for this new Netflix run. But I would say there were lots of people that have got a lot of great things to say about this episode, and I just think they are massively off base in some cases where they've been taken into by the gloss of this and gone, oh, it's amazing, and you go like, yeah, you're not really challenging this anymore. This isn't, this needs to be challenging. But we shall see. Anyway, there we go. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening. If you like what we're doing and you want to score us up, this is the ironic part that I'm now asking for reviews. I want a 5-star review for the podcast. Sorry. So it goes. We're playing the game just as much as everybody else. Leave a review. Or if you really like what we're doing, come check out us on Patreon. We do a whole bunch of other things. We talk about the Twilight Zone, as we said. There is more additional content for all the mainstream shows. I do a 30-minute thoughts. There's all kinds of bits and pieces of interactions going on over there. Go check out the links down below. But now, Julian, thank you very much. It's been a good discussion. I like when we have these kind of, don't always agree on things. We'll see how it goes for the rest of the season.
I think we're pretty close, actually.
Yeah.
I like playing devil's advocate, but I think we're actually pretty close.
You say devil's advocate. You like winding me up. That's what you like doing. You like to get me raging about things. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. We shall see you on the next episode.